As we mature into adulthood, we begin to walk our own path in life. There are countless ways to go, and all too often we choose to travel the easy path, the path of least resistance. But as we keep walking, we learn that the easy way is not always the best way. And when we walk even further, we realize that the path uphill leads to the top. The more difficult the walk, the more rewarding the view. And finally, when we reach those peaks, we then see how many more peaks there are. And once we've walked to one summit, we know we can walk to so many more. Walker Neer was an ordinary guy walking an ordinary path in Middle America. Single, successful, and hosting stand-up comedy, Walker was fulfilling his ambitions, but over time began to realize a desire for something more. He felt the need to walk a more meaningful line. Creating the Walk Show podcast allowed Walker to not only explore meaningful conversations with interesting people, it also sent him down many new paths, forcing him to step outside his comfort zone. And listening to his journey is fascinating. The Walk Show not only explores great subjects in depth with cool guests, it documents Walker's journey of self-discovery and personal growth. His other podcast, Pick Up Your Sticks, dives deep into topics from the perspective of two gamers with his co-host, Brett Lindley. Walker is applying his knowledge and documenting the benefits impacting his life. Hear all about his extraordinary experiences as I walk the line with Walker Neer. What game do you spend the most time on?
Man, I don't know. I would say, probably throughout my whole life, the time I've spent the most is probably, embarrassingly enough, World of Warcraft, which is a very famous game for the last 15 years.
Yeah, but that's kind of old school, and you're kind of old school, so, that kind of makes sense. That's the timeline is right, at least, right?
right. But I say that, but I haven't, I probably played that last a couple of months ago now. But I subscribe. So there's a website called Humble Bundle that sells bundles of games for pretty cheap. So you might get 10 or 15 games for like $10.
Oh, wow.
So I do a lot of that, buying a lot of those bundles, and I subscribe to a couple of different services that just give you a ton of games, access to a ton of games. So I have a pretty expansive library on my own, but then I also am constantly getting access to try new things. So I'm not very loyal when it comes to games. I play a lot, and I always say that it's kind of like I'm chasing the dragon, in so much as that there is some points in time where I can play a game and get hooked into it in such a way that I lose track of time. Right. And again, like I'd said earlier, I don't have kids or a wife or anything, so I have that.
You can get away with it.
Right. But that's what I love. I love getting lost in something and then looking at the clock, and it's like, oh, wow, I had no idea that much time had elapsed.
Well, and artists call that flow state, right?
Yeah.
For writers and stuff, you can kind of get into that zone, that flow state where it's just like things are rocking and rolling.
Yes, I would say that's exactly right.
Well, and what I find interesting is how the evolution of not gaming, but like, I don't want to say rental of games, or like, but how you purchase, how you get new games. That's come from back in the old school days of a cartridge and a player, to then it started streaming and things going online, and now, like you said, it's like this whole bundle package, and there's constantly new games being added. It's amazing how all that has changed over just my lifetime.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you see gaming. It's not where music is. Where now, I don't remember the last time I bought a song. Right, like everything is streamed, but I don't actually purchase it. I just pay Google Music, not Spotify, but same difference. Gaming is heading in that kind of, in movies, they went that direction, right? You used to have to rent or buy each individual movie. Even Redbox, when that was a big revolution, it was still 1-to-1, right?
Right.
Then I've got 4 or 5 streaming services I've got access to, and I've got more movies that I could watch in a lifetime. You know what I mean? So games is also going in that direction, just a little more slowly, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy how it's all come full circle. All right, man. Well, let's go ahead and we'll dive right into this thing.
Cool.
This is the Extraordinary Podcast, and my guest today is Walker Neer, host of the Walk Show and Pick Up Your Sticks with Brett Lindley. Did
Yes,
I get
sir.
that right?
That's correct, sir. Thank you. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time to hang out for a little bit, man.
Yeah.
So you're talking to you out in where are you? Springfield, Missouri, right?
Yes, sir. Springfield, Missouri. The home you may not know of Bass Pro. It's actually the city where Bass Pro Shops was started.
I did not know that. And the other thing I did not know about Bass Pro Shop until just the other day is the old aquarium or whatever it is that's in Memphis, the giant pyramid that's right there off of the Mississippi River. That's a Bass Pro Shop now?
Right. Yes. Yeah. I don't know what it was originally, but I did know that it is that.
I think it was like a museum or an aquarium or something. I don't remember either, but now it
looks like a dark pyramid or something. It's crazy.
It certainly looks out of place.
Yes.
The Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah.
The home of the Walk Show and Bass Pro Shop.
And Brad Pitt. He's from here. So yeah, there's just a litany of famous people, not including me.
Nice. I'm really excited to get to talk to you. We're going to dive into how we met and go into some of that and how we connected again. But I'm grateful that you're willing to kind of let me pick your brain, because I've been doing my research and been preparing for this interview, I realize more and more, like, you're kind of, I don't want to say you're my key demographic, but there's so many things that you're doing that just fit right into where I'm trying to go. And so I'm really excited about this interview in particular. So I kind of feel like a little bit of like a scientist, like I'm going to be taking notes and stuff. But
okay.
Thank you in advance for entertaining me and bearing with me as we kind of muddle our way through this.
But, really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
So you enjoy gaming, you're a gamer, and then you're 9 to 5, you're in software. So you're a project manager in that realm. So you're in front of a screen there as well. And then you're also doing this podcast with these remote recordings. So how are you juggling all this, first of all?
Well, so not having a family to provide or care for probably goes a long way.
Right.
I don't really owe my time to anyone else, which certainly has its downsides too. So I don't mean that the idea of a family is horrible or something, but yeah,
it allows certain freedoms and flexibility.
It does. Yeah. It's funny though, colleagues of mine, when I used to work in the office, would sometimes tell me that they were so jealous of me because I could stay up all night and play a video game if I wanted. And I was like, yeah, but when I get sick, no one cares. You know what I mean? Like, if I get sick,
right,
I got to go to the store and get the orange juice, and I got to make the chicken noodle soup, and I get it. Woe is me. I can handle it. But like, it'd be cool to have someone that cared. Right. So, and I don't mean, I'm not like depressed about it or something, but just simply like, there's an upside to having family as well.
For sure. Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, certainly if this COVID stuff has pointed out anything, it's that we are social creatures.
Oh yeah.
We need that social interaction. And it's really important that we are interacting with other human beings, whoever they are. I mean, it could be the clerk at the grocery store. It could be a wife. It could be kids. It could be a grandparent. It could be whatever. But having regular social interaction is vital to our mental health, if nothing else, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I used to, before I started doing the podcast, for a long time, I didn't really have anything that was that consistent that I needed to do when I got off work. So I kind of just worked and then just kind of hung out and played games and hung out with friends and just kind of whatever came. And now I am busy way more often because I've got, the 2 podcasts I do. Sometimes I have opportunities like this to go on other shows. I've got to do editing and all that stuff. And it is surprising.
Yeah,
to me.
You gave yourself a second job is what you did.
Yeah, that doesn't pay anything. That's true.
Yeah, the pay is terrible. It's very rewarding, but the pay is horrible.
Right. But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I just make time for it. And I think that, kind of what you were alluding to as you were introducing me, a lot of the stuff that I've dived into here in the last year has been a lot of personal development stuff too. And so that's, I think, probably also gone a long way in just helping me to be able to consistently feel better, because that's really why I started doing all the personal development stuff, was not to become a guru, and not because I had some lofty goal in mind, but just I think everyone, has bouts of depression and anxiety. That's a normal human thing. But how do I minimize the time I have to spend in that place when I go there? And that's what I've really been trying to work towards. So I think that those things help me too. So yeah.
It's really interesting to me because we both started down this podcast path really kind of at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And Podfest was where we met, and we kind of had that little experience and that was kind of like a big kind of transformative point for us as well. But if you don't mind, just tell me a little bit about the process of when you first started to want or have the thought of doing a podcast, and then bringing that to fruition, what that looked like.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I've been a podcast fan for several years. I wasn't someone who was really early on podcasts. I mean, they've been around for 15 years now. I'm probably only in the last 5 or 6 years that I really discovered them. So I was a big podcast fan. I'm a very talkative person. I mean, there's pictures of me when I was 2 years old on the table at Thanksgiving dinner telling my family stories. And I'm sure I couldn't even form full sentences. You know what I mean? So I've always just been that guy. When I graduated high school, I thought I was going to be a stand-up comedian, and I went and did stand-up, and I've been the MC and hosted different shows on a week-over-week basis and stuff. But it never really, it just never really resonated with me to keep going, right? But anyways, all of that's just to say that I've always been someone who likes to talk and who likes to talk at people, and sometime late 2018, early 2019, I don't know, somewhere in there, a friend of mine came to me and she was like, I really just think you should start a podcast. And I'd tossed the idea around, but my idea of what a podcast was that I had to be an authority on something, right? Whether that be lawn care or diet or whatever, money, whatever the thing is, I need to be an authority, or I need to have access to celebrities. And I'm not an authority on anything, and I don't have access to celebrities. So I was like, well, what show would I have? And she gave me some very flattering advice, and basically just said that there's a guy named Dak Shepard who's an actor, but he has a podcast called The Armchair Expert. And same deal, he's not an authority on anything, which is why it's called Armchair Expert. And so but what she explained was that his show resonated with her because he is very vulnerable in the way that he explains his own thought processes. And she, and this is the flattering part, said that was true of me as well, just in a natural way. Like just the way I naturally communicate has this kind of vulnerability to it that like her herself doesn't naturally come across. And so she just thought that no matter what the show is about, it would be good. So that was, my ego had to be petted first. And then after that, I got upset at work one day, which is, I mean, it's not even that big of a deal, but I got upset at work one day and decided, I really do need to start something that I have control over, and not specifically just to replace my job. I mean, if I could turn podcasting into a career, I would love that. But just something where I can put my own energy and not to be cliche, but my heart and soul into it, and no one can tell me no. I mean, yeah, people could not listen, but I still get to make the show that I want to make. So anyway, so that day when I had that revelation, I ordered the microphone, and I'm very fortunate. I have a friend who's a sound engineer, and he said, and he was at who I asked, what kind of mic should I get? And so he told me that. And then he said, hey, if you're interested, I would be willing to engineer your show for you, to do the production of it and edit it and whatever. If you want to do that, because I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. And so I was like, yeah, let's go. And I just kind of started. I mean, the first episode, I didn't know what the show was going to be like. The first episode I did, I think it's like a 15-minute episode, and I talk about a video game that I played that I liked, a new musical artist that had come out that I liked, a news story that I thought was I mean, I don't know, and just kind of did it, and then just kind of kept doing it. And Went to Podfest. Sorry, I don't mean to monologue. Go ahead.
In the words of Chris Kremetzos, he started ugly.
I did. Yes, I did. Absolutely.
The host of Podfest.
Yeah, I think that advice is huge. There's a balance to all things, so planning and thinking about things intellectually does have a place, but especially when you're just new at something, action is more important, because the truth is that it doesn't matter if the first episode I did was my very best episode, no one was going to listen to it anyway, because no one knows who I am.
Anyway,
no, right.
So you might as well.
Right. So yeah, so I just kind of started, and I went to Podfest in 2019 after I only had 5 episodes out. Had no idea what I was doing there. Had never been to a conference.
Oh, so you went to Podfest the year before?
Correct. Yeah. I've been 2 years. And that was really inspiring to go to that. That was a really smart thing to do. And I say smart. Buzzsprout, the media host I use, offered me tickets, so that's how I knew. But yeah, that inspired me a lot. And then I realized that I wanted to talk about gaming, but the Walk Show, my first podcast that I started, doesn't really have a theme, and I don't want it to, because I want to talk to whoever I want to talk to about whatever I want, which I get makes it not as monetizable, right? Because there's not a select demographic, and there's not a guaranteed topic. But
well, I don't know if I agree with that. I like the idea of a walk of life. I think that's brilliant. I think it's a great tagline.
Sure. Well, you have to do. So here's the secret that you don't know is that the logo that I have for the Walk Show and the tagline both came to be true about a week before Podfest 2020. The logo when I started the show was me in a samurai Halloween costume in front of outer space, and there was no tagline. When people used to ask me what the show is about, I was like, it's kind of like Joe Rogan, except there's no celebrities. But yeah, now we have the tagline, exploring the walk of life, which I don't mean to go on in vain about my own title, but I liked it simply because the Walk Show it's called that because my name is Walker, but now it seems like it's not just that, right? Like
it's taking a life of its own.
Right. Exactly.
It's like any of this stuff. You start ugly. You just, it grows, it changed. I mean, the Extraordinary Podcast, that wasn't even the name originally for this one. A buddy of mine was going to do it, and he ended up deciding not to do it. And I was like, well, can I use it? He's like, well, sure. So I was like, well, there you go. And
right.
Next thing you know, because I figured out a cool logo that just kind of stumbled on with the XO and whatever. And it just everything just kind of falls into place. But I find what has been interesting for me going down a similar journey that you have is that when you do have a purpose, when you do have a vision, when you do have something that you're working towards, how these little things fall into place. Like how, like your buddy just said, hey, I like doing sound engineer stuff. And a similar experience for me when I was looking for people to interview on my first couple of shows. One of my buddies from high school owned a music production company, and they did production down in downtown Atlanta. And he's like, I'm trying to remodel my studio in my basement. And he's like, if you want to help me do that, I'll bust out your first couple episodes. I'll do some music for you. I'll do that. And I was like, well, okay. And I got the time. And next thing you know, it's like these little, and for my journey, there's been about at least, I'd say probably between 10 and a dozen specific people and experiences like that along the way that have just furthered the cause. It's like you do your morning writings. I was reading similar to me. It's like when you're journaling for those things, like, man, I need a video guy. I need to get this video production stuff done. I'm just like, I'm struggling in the video area. And then next thing you know, a month later, plop, here's a video guy. You want to get an interview for the podcast? Cool. You want to help me do this interview editing? All right. It's just like, it's amazing how it all works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the example that is most clear to me, which is the person that is a mutual friend of ours, who I think you've had on your show, and she's I guess on my show as well, which by the time this airs, I think she'll be out on my show as well. But and that's Carolyn Owens. I mean, man, what a lightning bolt of kindness and generosity and just warmth. She doesn't even know me really, right? And we met at Podfest. She took a liking to me. I mean, I like her a lot, to be clear, so it's not like it's one-sided, but And she's just nonstop trying to help me out. And I,
She's
I,
just an incredible human being. I mean,
she
and it
sure
was
is.
the exact same experience for me. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't remember how we connected at Podfest or what the circumstance were. I think she was just sitting at an empty table, and I
Hmm.
just happened to sit down next to her, which is exactly how I met Pablo, which was an exact same kind of similar story at a Buzzsprout event at Podfest. But it was
Right.
just like, for whatever reason, I just connected with her on such a, I mean, it was almost like a spiritual level. It was really weird. It was like, we just like knew each other. Next thing you know, we're texting back and forth. She's saving me seats and we're doing, it's like we were like, almost like we were dating or something. It was crazy.
Right.
And we like, we'd literally known each other for just a brief few minutes, but yeah, it's been, she's just an amazingly special human being for sure. I'm glad you took the time to say shout out to Carolyn.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that, lady?
Have to. Yep. Have to.
So, who else has helped you along the path? Have you had any mentors along the way? I know this is, for me, this podcasting experience has been a really big learning curve because, again, I come from a non-technical background. I'm a construction guy at heart. Who else has kind of helped carry you along this path?
Oh man. I mean, I was just talking about it on an episode I recorded recently. I was talking to a buddy who, actually the guy who engineered my show at first and still provides the music for the show. This is kind of a digressive answer, so forgive me, but I'll get there, I promise.
Well, no, because that was actually my next question to talk about the music. So you're actually tying two together.
Okay,
so perfect.
cool. So
great minds think alike.
Right. So he just recently started a YouTube channel, and he's been working on a new music album. And then he also went and got a GoPro and a drone and has been capturing footage all around St. Louis, which is the city he lives in. And then has made a music video for one of his songs. And I was telling him that it was just so cool to me that I know that he writes, performs, sings, mixes, edits the music, then captures all the video footage, and then edits all of that, and then puts that all together. Like, all of the thing is just from his head, right? And for me, with my show, like, that's not true. Like, he helps me with music, right? He provides the music for my show, so I lean on him for that. I have a guest as often as I can, so when that's true, they're really the content, not me, right? My friend Brett Lindley, who co-hosts Pick Up Your Sticks, he helped me design the logo for the Walk Show, right? So yeah, I totally stand on the shoulders of giants in my podcast. It is 100% not like my friend's music video where it's all just his genius.
Right.
There's lots of people, but I mean, Misha has been huge. You know, he stayed with me. That's the guy who makes the music and engineered Misha Zarins. He was huge. He really believed in me, and really pushed me to keep going with the show, and gave me a lot of encouragement. He stepped away from editing probably 5 or 6 months in, but by that time I was comfortable enough with the rest of the process that learning that wasn't that big of a deal. And
that's a very natural cycle. That's a good thing for to happen. And number one, it gives you a little bit more responsibility, and also it shows your appreciation and not continue to lean on him for things you're capable of doing for yourself. I think that's a very responsible way to handle it.
No, I was glad with how it worked out. And he still gets to be featured in the show because his music is in every episode, right? So,
well, and I love that you plug him at every.
Oh yeah,
very consistent with with your intros and your breaks and everything, giving proper credit where credit's due. I think that's a beautiful.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I try and go out of my way to do that, because I really am super grateful. I mean, a lot of people when they start a podcast don't know that's one of the biggest hangups they have is how do I get uncopyrighted music, and I've got a guy who's been creating music for 15 years and recording it. So lucky me, you know? But anyway, and then I've got countless friends that a lot of them are shy and probably don't want to be named. And I probably would forget someone, so I won't try and name them. But I have a lot of friends and family that have been very supportive and encouraging of me the whole time, and have given me advice. I mean, my mom, doesn't know a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about on the show. Not all of the time, but some of the time she's not familiar with it, but she's still willing to give me feedback on how she interpreted it. And so there's been plenty of times where I've been like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. And, it's changed things based on someone who's not even invested that much in the content of the show, but cares about me. Right. So I've just been really lucky with those kinds of people. And then, people like Carolyn, another guy who is actually the person that introduced me to Carolyn at Podfest, but his name's Jameson Smallwood. He has a podcast called Culture and Conversations. He's been huge. I mean, he's been incredibly supportive and nice. I mean, just out of nowhere, I'll just get an email from Jameson, and it's not once a week or once a month. It might be 3 months apart, but I'll just get a random email where he'll just be like, "Hey man, I listened to this episode and this episode, and I thought it was really awesome. And I think you should absolutely keep doing what you're doing." And it's like, he doesn't owe me anything. You know what I mean? So it's genuine.
He's not obligated to do anything.
No, and I can't. Yeah. He has more listeners than I do. He's been doing it longer. Like, I don't offer him anything, right? So he's not.
Right.
He's just a genuinely nice guy. So
isn't that what's so cool about this space, though, man? Like, that is just, it's remarkable to me how frequently you come across that in the podcasting community. At least it's been my experience.
Yeah,
between
absolutely.
Carolyn and I mean, like, you put me in touch with Jameson. I mean, we're just now starting to connect, but it's just like everybody is. And what I like about the industry is it provide, and this is becoming a common theme. I'm getting a little repetitive on the show about this, but it's a win-win situation. It creates these win-win opportunities. It creates these opportunities for people to flourish, for people to grow, for people to feel a sense of belonging. Like, it's just, despite the fact that we're all isolated in our own little caves doing our own little things, it's like when we come together at things like Podfest and have these cool experiences, it's just, we're networking, we're growing, we're like, it's really cool. It's got that vibe to it that, I mean, coming from other industries, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't exist, like coming from software like that, coming from construction. I mean, it's like construction's a cutthroat business. It's like, it's all about, like you were talking about with Ted and the episode you did with him, like, it's all about like, what's in it for me? How am I going to get my deal done? And, and it's just like, but with maybe it's because in podcasting, there's not a whole lot of money involved. Maybe that's got something to do with it. Like, we know we're all broke. We know we all can't pay anything or whatever, but like, so it's like, we're all just kind of trying to look out for each other. Maybe that's the golden ticket, but I love it. It makes me feel so warm and fuzzy on the inside.
Yeah, I think so. I think that you're right about that. I mean, and obviously people can make money doing podcasting, and some people do. But I think that it's kind of like I've got a buddy who's a writer, and he's introduced me to some other writers who I've actually been fortunate enough to have as guests on my show. But like, the way that the writers all interact is kind of the way that podcasters interact, where there's not a sense of competitiveness. It's a sense of like it comes from a place of creativity and then wanting to explore that together, more so than it does coming from a place of like, well, I'm trying to figure out how to extract the money that's available here, and I don't want to help you figure that out too, because then you'll be taking my money. That's how it is in a lot of industries, but it's not that way with podcasting, and it's not really that way with the writers. Like, the writers that I've talked to, they're not jealous of someone else writing a book because they think that means you won't read their book too. You know what I mean? Like,
it's more like a collaborative effort at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's with the podcast. Like, I mean, you and I have, I mean, our shows are not identical at all, but we have a wide variety of guests and topics, right? But I don't feel any sense of competition with you. I hope that people listen to your show, right? I hope that because I'm going to have you as a guest on my show too. I hope when that happens, that promotes more people to listen, because there's enough time for people to listen to both. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's such a cool feeling when you've got people looking out, trying to cross promote, trying to help each other out. Like I just interviewed this Instagram, I'll call her a model for lack of a better word. I mean, she's gorgeous. She's Australian and she shoots guns, and like, she's got a gazillion followers, and she has, I mean, she didn't know me from anybody, and we just connected through Instagram, and she has done so much for me and just been so willing to help. And, that has not been my experience with other guests and like in other situations. And man, it feels really good to have somebody like what you were saying with Jameson, where they're just going to bat for you a little bit, man.
Right.
It's really nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Very sustaining, but It's funny because a lot of the things that you don't enjoy or the areas in life that you struggled in
Mm,
are areas that I spent a lot of time. Two of those was line cook, which I grew up working it. I mean, I started off as a dishwasher and worked my way up to line cook at some
yeah.
point. But and then I ran my own construction design build firm for a number of years, and you hate handyman stuff, so it's like that's the handyman stuff is like in my arena. So I
Right.
thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the truth is that I just don't have a natural affinity for it. I'm not I'm not very good at it, and I get frustrated quickly. I mean, like when I worked in the kitchen, I got along with the people fine. It's just really hard work. When you get hurt every day, like I got cut every day, and it wasn't because I cut myself with a knife. It's because
Or
whoever
burned,
designs these
or
cabinets doesn't know how to round an edge off. So you go to grab something and your finger slices, and it's just like, God, why? Or yeah, you get burned. Like, I mean, I worked with some dudes in the kitchen who were some of the nicest. Not everyone that works in the kitchen is nice, but some of the guys I worked
no.
with were some of the nicest people, but they weren't always the safest people. So, they might be real friendly. They might also walk around a corner carrying a pot of boiling water and bump into you, and they don't spill the whole thing, but they get some on you, and they're just like, oh, my bad. And it's like, how about you don't burn me instead of my bad? Like, I don't really care about my bad. I do care about not being
When I'm
burned.
scalding to death, yeah.
Right, exactly. But it's not because they're monsters. It's just because
They don't care.
they just don't
They're
care.
still doing a thing. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
that's the
whatever.
world, and I just,
The
yeah, I'm good.
hustle and bustle. Yeah, it's a hectic work environment for sure in both of those arenas. But well, I was curious. I was listening to your episode about taking your Colorado trip, and
Okay.
I actually and the reason why I bring it up is because I leave in the morning to go head out to
Oh,
Colorado
cool.
myself. My sister's getting married out there, so I'm really excited.
Awesome.
I go out there pretty regular. I've got family out there, but it was interesting because you have not done a lot of travel traditionally,
Oh, yeah.
and leading up to that trip, you talk about in your podcast how you had some anxiety and were like kind of like ready to maybe cancel and not go there for a minute,
Yeah.
but ultimately you took the trip and had a really really fun time.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about. I mean, we don't have to recap the whole trip. If you want to hear about the trip, you can go listen to the episode. But um, what kind of led up to that? Like, I guess the reason why I'm bringing all this up, I'm rambling all over the place. I
You're good.
apologize. It's the limiting mindset. Like, it seems to me like
Oh,
at one point in time, you looked through the lens of a limiting mindset a little bit more. And now, the podcast has come, or maybe as you've gone through some personal development stuff, you've kind of had a shift to more of a learning mindset. And that trip certainly seemed to me to fall into that category. Am I off base here? Or does that make
no,
sense?
no, I would say that's probably fair. There's a lot of thoughts that come into my mind, so I'll try and start here and see if this makes sense. But I would say that the biggest thing that I had the biggest limiting thought that I used to have for myself was that I didn't believe that I was a person who was capable of being consistent or having discipline. Um, Not that I was, only ever let anyone down or something that dramatic, but I just, there was a repeating pattern of my life where I would be like, hey, I'm going to start this. And then, 4 months later, I don't do that anymore. 2 months later, or whatever the time frame is. And while the podcast was something that I started again, really for kind of a creative outlet and just to kind of see what it would be like, I was really, really afraid that the podcast would be yet another thing that I started and didn't keep doing. Right. But that wasn't true. I started it, and I put out, when I very first started, I used to put out multiple episodes a week because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no schedule. And then eventually I moved to doing one podcast a week or one episode a week. But I very rarely have missed a week. I mean, there's been a few weeks where I haven't put an episode out, but I feel comfortable with it because it's consistent otherwise. And then but that wasn't an intentional thing. I didn't do it to build this belief in myself for discipline or consistency. It just kind of happened. But I think that almost subconsciously then led me to this personal development stuff, because that was a big thing that I really wanted to work on coming into the personal development space, was my consistency and my discipline. And I almost had the podcast to kind of fall back on as an example of like, hey, you said you were going to do it and you did, right? Um,
So you kind of feel like the podcast was a confidence builder to start down a road of personal growth and development kind of thing.
yes, exactly.
Huh.
And so, the trip to Colorado, I had a really good friend who's, one of my closest buddies that moved out there last summer, and he had tried to get me to come out for a couple of different concerts, and it didn't just work out because of scheduling things. But I always try and take off time at the end of the year. If possible, I like to try and take off the last 2 weeks of December up until the new year. And so I did that last year, and yeah, he'd invited me out, and I was nervous about going, and I was scared of making the drive, and I was, will I even like it out there, and all this, and yeah, I had some friends that were actually, they were very nice because they were supportive, but they were actually just kind of annoyed seeming, like when I was like, yeah, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe I delay it by a day, right? Like I wasn't actually saying I was going to quit. I was like working my way towards backing out, but I wanted to like float these ideas or whatever. And yeah, and my friends were just like, dude, like shut up and just go. Like just go. If you don't go, these 2 weeks will probably not be memorable in the long run. If you do go, you'll have a story for the rest of your life. And that's true. And so I kind of just said, fine, I'll go. And that was true with going to Podfest. I mean, when I went to Podfest in 2019, I've never traveled to, well, that's not true. I had traveled to Florida for work one time, but never on my own, time have I. And I mean, frankly, just paying for the plane ticket and the hotel was like, well, that's an unexpected expense. I mean, it's like probably $1,000
big one,
total,
yes.
right? And should I do that? I mean, I could, but I don't know if I should. And I had another friend then that was like, same thing, like, dude, no one's life story is I was gonna make it, but then I lost $1,000 and the rest of my life was destroyed. Like that's no one's story, but plenty of people have the story of I took a chance on something and it totally worked out. So I went to Podfest under that kind of same like just shut up and do it, and did, and yeah, it was both experiences were huge for me. Both experiences were great, and yeah, I hope to go back to Colorado. Now I don't know with pandemic stuff when all that makes sense for people again, but
right.
But yeah, I'd like to go again.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. So was Podfest 2019 kind of the first time you had kind of done the whole personal vacation on your own, kind of just like?
Yeah, I mean, when I was like 19, I dated a girl who lived in Nashville, and I flew there one time to visit her. Other than that, that was the only time that was the only time I'd ever flown until I started working at the software company where I work now. And then I traveled a handful of times for that.
Yeah, just for work or whatever.
Right.
But that's a completely different experience then, for sure.
Yes.
That's cool. So what was the funnest experience that you had in Colorado?
My buddy actually just drove us around the mountains for like 6 hours one day. We left Denver and just drove out into the mountains and went all over the place. We went to the Continental Divide, and then probably other landmarks that I'm not remembering now, and just, I don't know, just look at all this. Like, it's winter, so it's all snow covered. And so you see these mountain villages that are, just these picturesque, like snow capped roofs. And I live in Springfield, Missouri, which is in the southern part of Missouri. And when I was a kid, we used to get snow, but the frost line has moved up north now in the United States. And so
right,
we don't really get snow that much anymore. And I love snow. I'm a winter guy.
And that high country is something else, man.
Oh man. Well, I've never, I've seen mountains in video games, right? But I've never been to a mountain like that before. At least not to that level. I mean, when I was a kid, we went to Pikes Peak, which yes, is a mountain in Colorado, but I was a kid and it was one time. So to be an adult and go and just drive around and adventure, like, yeah, it was just really cool.
Well, and what I'm really excited for next time is I hope that you take it now to that next level and try out the snowboarding and the skiing and some of the other, or even the snowmobiling like you talked about. That's great activity.
That's probably what I'll do unless I'm in way better physical shape, because I don't really want to tear my knees off trying to snowboard.
You'll be fine. You're still young. Whatever. talking about that. So like it seems like you're have maybe traditionally not been well. Okay, so what I really like to know is as you have started some of these personal development routines, talking about like the meditation and the morning writings and some of these other things, have you incorporated the exercise as one of those things as well?
Yeah. So every day I try and do 6 activities. There are some days where I'm not perfect, but that was also a huge thing in my personal development, is understanding that it's not about perfection; it's about progress, right? So
Right.
just because I don't do all 6 every day, if I miss a day, it doesn't matter. I'm not broke.
What are the six, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So that's yeah. So it's I'll give credit where credit's due. It's from a book called The Miracle Morning. Uh,
That's it. Miracle Morning.
but so I do affirmations, and the prescription in the book is to do these 6 activities for 10 minutes in a day, so an hour total. But so I do affirmations, I do meditation, I do visualization, I read, I journal, and then I exercise.
That's kind of all in my wheelhouse because I'm doing my little personal development plan too. That's why I was curious, and
Sure.
I've got my 3 habits in 30 minutes as my little thing
Okay.
for the morning routine. But so of all of that, as you've incorporated those things into your life, I'm curious. Number one, which one was the most difficult to do, and then number two, which one do you think has benefited you the most?
Hmm. I don't. The thing I talk and think about these things quite a bit, and I actually go back and forth so often. So the one that I struggle with the most actually is probably visualization. Um, I'm just not naturally a daydreamer. Like when I was a kid, I
What is that supposed to look like?
you mean like what do I think visualization is supposed to look like?
In your steps, yeah. What is
Yeah.
that? What is that process supposed to look
I
like?
mean, my understanding of it is just to to imagine yourself being in a place that you want to be, whether that be an ideal day or whether that be. Now, I'm not nervous when I go to Podfest, but let's say I was nervous about going to Podfest, like imagining myself interacting with people there or something. Um, but that's just it. Is I probably the clearest example of it that I've been given is imagine an ideal day. So you wake up in the morning. What does the room look like? You go out of your bedroom. What do you do? What's next on your agenda? What are you thinking about? And I try. I mean, I practice it. So I work at it, and sometimes I feel like I get something that resonates with me. But I'm just not a daydreamer. I mean, when I was a kid, and I was bored. Like I remember I was in high school and I was at some job orientation and it was incredibly boring for like 8 hours. They were just lecturing about the history of the company and I don't care. And most people would like doodle or daydream or whatever. Well, I had learned this equation in trigonometry class called the quadratic equation that has a bunch of variables in it. And so I just sat and wrote out the quadratic equation and then would just plug different numbers and just do that equation. The whole paper was full of that. I'm not a math genius or something, as I don't mean to imply that. That's the way my mind goes. You know what I mean? I think
Huh.
I like to analyze things and be logical about things much more than I like to um, hope about things.
Right. Well, no, I mean, certainly that vision. I mean, what it's funny because one of the questions I ask is like, what does a perfect or an ideal day look like 10 years from now, or whatever?
Yeah,
Because one of the things that's important to me is like, just from a goal setting perspective, is like figuring out what it is you want,
yeah,
So
yeah.
from that perspective, I think that that's helpful. But to try to, yeah, I guess I could see that. So, what area do you feel like has helped you the most?
Yeah, so that's why I say it's a multifaceted answer. I think the one I was surprised the most by was meditation. Um, I I for a long time had this what I call a movie version of meditation, where I thought if you meditated, it meant that you had emptied your mind and you never had a thought, and you're like,
Yeah, it's don't think for 30 minutes, right? Like,
yeah, and so I
how
always
does that supposed to work?
right. So I just thought I didn't know how to do it. But the truth was that I just had never tried for very long. I'd do it for 5 or 10 minutes one day and then be like, well, I didn't get anything out of that. Well, once I started doing it day after day after day, I came to understand that the the practice of observing thoughts and coming back to center and then having thoughts come in and then going back to center, going back to now, that is the value of meditation. Like that is the benefit of it, is it's practicing having this
The
swirl of
process.
thoughts, right? And then learning to say, you know what, I'm going to be an observer of this, not a slave to it, right? Like, I know you're going to bring this up later, but a guy I had on my show, Brent Basham, we talked for a while, and he talked about an idea that really resonated with me, which is the idea of learning to respond instead of react, right? Because a response is something you choose, whereas a reaction, although arguably you choose everything, doesn't feel like you're choosing it in that moment.
It's off the cuff.
Yeah, well, it's usually the result of a choice that you already made previous to then, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, so meditation's probably been the most surprising one, but affirmations, man, like for so long I didn't understand, and I still don't. So I don't mean it like I'm from the mountaintop. I'm here to tell you I'm not.
Yeah.
But it's hard to understand how to change what you believe about yourself and what you believe about the world. And it turns out that affirmations just work. It's just the shortest shortcut that I have ever found to changing. Like, so earlier I talked about how I used to think that I wasn't capable of being disciplined or consistent. Well, affirmations that I do to this day are just simply, I am disciplined, I am consistent. It's amazing how much that means, you know what I mean? And it's amazing how powerful it is. So but then the last one I'll mention, and to be clear, I think that journaling and reading are great, so me not mentioning them doesn't disvalue them at all. They're awesome. But honestly, exercising and just going for walks, which is ironic because my name is Walker. But yeah, I go for walks all the time, and now I've built a belief in myself where if I feel stressed or anxious, I just go for a walk. I mean, sometimes you can't just put everything down right that moment, but as quickly as I can, I'm out the door for a walk. And I don't care if it's raining, I don't care if it's snowing, I don't care. Because what I've found is that when I go engage myself physically, and probably also leaving the space and getting outdoors and connecting with nature, right? All of those things, it shifts my mental perspective, and it doesn't solve all my problems. None of these things by themselves are the one size fits all. If you meditate every day, you'll never have stress in your life. No, that's nonsense. But all of these things help to be tools that help me to deal with those stresses that are unavoidable, right? So
Everyone contributes positively in some way.
yeah,
Everyone is like a little extra. It's like, again, it's like, which direction are you going? And the more of that you can add, the
right.
more of these things that you can implement, the better things tend to work out. The
Yeah,
better things tend to go.
exactly.
It's not well. It's like you talk about a lot of times and a lot of the guests that you have. It's like these cliches. You dismiss them as cliches because they're cliches, but when you actually break them down, they're true. Like there's a reason why they're cliches. They hold up over time. So
Yeah. Well, and it also, I used to think that it was annoying that I used to think that, in air quotes, which no one can see except you, but in air quotes, that self-help stuff was all dumb because it's just the same recycled stuff. The truth of it is that it is the same recycled stuff, but I actually do think that it's important that people say it in their own way, because clearly the ways that we have come up with to explain these principles so far don't resonate with everyone, because everyone's not on board. So we need people to continue to develop new ways to say this stuff, and new ways, new contexts and lenses to look at this stuff through until we can save everyone. You know what I mean?
right, because it seems like these things are missing from more and more people. It seems like they're needed
Yes.
now more than ever, and for some reason, I just feel like, I mean, it's kind of like part of my little mission. It just seems like nobody's. It's just like it's missing from society. It's missing from the populace at large.
Well, and I mean, I'm derailing a bit here, but you and I, before we started recording, just talked briefly about how crazy the news is and how crazy politics is and all of this. And it's like, if that's what you consume all the time, then it does just lead to a lot of anxiety, because it's just a lot of anxious stuff out there.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. It's like just like if you're adding all those little positives to head off to that direction. You add social media, add watching the news, add stress at the job. Add all these negative things on the other side, and it steers you down a negative course just as quickly.
Right. And I don't advocate that you put your head in the sand and don't know what's going on in the world either, but there's
right now, it's not a bad idea.
It might be fair.
I'm digging a hole, man. Sticking my head as quick as I can.
There's a famous podcaster named Duncan Trussell, and I saw a quote from him the other day that said, somewhere in the world there is a phoneless fool sitting by a waterfall that has no idea how scared or upset he's supposed to be.
I just posted that on social media myself.
Maybe that's where I saw it then, man. It might have been you that I saw it from. But yeah, like
I stole it from somebody. I can't take credit.
Yeah. Wherever I saw it, but yeah, it's like, man, that's the truth, Ain't
it true, brother? Ain't it true?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've been preaching. So we'll get off of the morning routines here real quick, but I did want to ask you, so with your meditations and your affirmations and these activities that you're doing, because I want to spend time with journaling and reading because I want to go down those little rabbit holes. But with those, you pick them up through the morning. I'm butchering it. What's it called? The book
Miracle Morning.
Miracle Morning. So with those, is there a meditation that's in the Miracle Morning that you follow? That's what your meditation is, or what do you use for that? And the same thing, obviously, with the affirmations, usually those you write those out yourself, and those become very individualized to you.
Right?
Is that what yours are? It sounds like yours are individualized to you for each one of these aspects.
Yeah.
Where do you get them from, or what are you actually using?
Right. So for meditation, I just do what I think is called mindfulness meditation, where I just try and focus on my breathing. So I'm not doing
no app,
there's no mantra,
no music, no nothing.
No, I sit in the dark if I can, in the silence, and just try and just try and focus on my breathing, and thoughts come in, and acknowledge them, but try and not get off on the thoughts, which inevitably I do. And then as quickly as I can, oh no, we're meditating, go back, and just try and stay in the moment, present as much as I can. I've done guided meditations. I've went to yoga classes and stuff where they do guided meditations, and I think that's all super cool. The watching my breathing though really was when it really kind of clicked for me. Yeah.
That breathing thing is key, man. If you can figure that, I mean, that's where it all starts, right?
Right.
So, and affirmations, those are just your own personal written out.
Yeah. So I'd started. I created my own affirmations originally, and then I had a personal friend of mine who's also a life coach had come on my show just to talk about her work and what she does. Well, her life coach overheard that and contacted me and asked if she could come on my show. And her name's Ashley Thomas. And so I invited her on, and her and I hit it off really well. And she actually asked me if I would be interested in potentially working with her as my coach personally. So I did. And she's been an enormous, tremendous help to me. But anyway, several months ago now, I had a bunch of activities coming up that I was dreading is too strong of a word, but not looking forward to. But ahead of that, I was in a pretty good space. And so I told her, I said, hey, I'm in a pretty good space right now, but I've got all of these activities coming up that I'm not looking forward to. And I don't want to be miserable while I go through those, right? There's a quote from a guy on Joe Rogan podcast that I heard sometime in the last year that was, pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. And man, that resonated with me, because it's like, yeah, I got to do these activities that I don't really want to do. It was work stuff, right? I've got to do work stuff I don't want to do. So that's mandatory, because unless I get a new job, that's how I eat, right? But being miserable about it that's the suffering. And that I know I don't have to go through it. So I want
that you can control.
Yeah. So I want to mentally prepare to not go through it. And so she said, okay, well, let's come up with 6 ideas of things that you think are working for you right now when you're feeling in a good space. Okay, great. So I wrote out these ideas and she said, okay, let's try and turn those into statements. So I did that. So I turned them into statements. She said, okay, so now you've got these statements. And it actually, I don't know if this was her intent or not, but for me, I was like, oh my God, these are going to be perfect affirmations. So now I use those, and I still use some of the old ones I'd come up with. But anyway, that was a very long way to say yes, they are personal and specifically tailored for me, and it was a bit of a process to create those. This latest version of them.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and really, they should evolve eventually. I mean, they don't. You know, I'm changing every day, but like over time, they do need to, because you're growing, you're evolving, you're improving. So that makes perfect sense. But I do see some where they're like, it's a specific mantra that's just kind of like a generic kind of statements or whatever. Like, I am good, I am, whatever.
Yeah.
But on the meditation side, though, I don't do any guided ones, but there's a guy on YouTube called Michael Seeley. Got to check him out. Because he has affirmations too. And one of the things that I've actually been delving into now that I've gotten comfortable with the meditation thing is this kind of like self-hypnosis, which just kind of takes it's all it is just meditation, but it just kind of takes it a little bit deeper. And man, I've really been digging on it. I've been really enjoying it, but now I got to be careful, because if I go too long, because sometimes I'll just wake up super early, and anyway, I'll have all these windows of opportunity, and I'll end up falling back asleep.
Oh, right.
But when you wake up from that sleep, man, it feels like you've been sleeping for a month, man. It is like
awesome.
It's weird. It's so fulfilling. But I digress and getting off on a side subject. Well, you said for the exercise, you're just walking, so there's no routine that you've picked up through any other sources or anything else like that?
No, I mean, there was a period where I I've got a heavy bag, like a punching bag here at my house, and there was a period where I was doing that. I would like to get back into it. I don't really know what that means, because it's not like there's really something holding me back.
Right, nothing stopping you.
Ideally, I understand that it's probably a good thing, and if I got back into doing it, I'm sure I would enjoy it a lot. But when I say I go for a walk, I mean, I'm not just walking around the block. I walk 3 to 6 miles a day usually. So it's longer walks, and I'm lucky. I've got they call it the Greenway Trail, but it's just a nature path out here basically. So I go walk that, and I mean, there's still neighborhoods kind of around, so I'm not out in the woods actually.
Oh, that's perfect.
It kind of feels like it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what you need. That's you doing that. That's checking that box as far as that's checking a couple of boxes. But yeah. Well, and like you talked about before, and for me, it's one of the 3 habits is just I break a sweat every day. Just whatever it takes to just break a sweat. And my thing. So my 3 habits in 30 minutes is pray, sweat, read. And so, but the pray is like meditation, kind of not trying to go down the whole religious thing or whatever. And then sweat, just some kind of exercise, break a sweat, and then read something that's uplifting, something kind of personal development, whatever. But
no, actually, I do want to say, and I don't mean to go off on a tangent about it either, but I do think that what you just said about praying and meditation and the similarities, I think is an important thing for people to understand, because I think that, and I'm generalizing a lot here, so I get that, but I think that there, at least in some groups, is a tendency to think of, if you're someone who's maybe a person that prays, to think that meditation is like a hippie practice or something, like a weird, something outside. And it's like, no, it's very similar. And for people who aren't religious, right, they might think that praying is like, oh, well, that's a Bible thumper thing or something. It's like, no, it's the same thing. You're in your own head, and you know what I mean? Like, and it's a period of reflection and a period of peacefulness. And I think they're both incredibly valuable. So
I break it down super simple. It's just like, don't call it prayer. It's just a time of gratitude. Taking 3 to 5 minutes and just thinking about the things you have to be thankful for.
Yeah.
And if you take 3 to 5 minutes, you run out of, my family, my roof over my head, my clean sheets, whatever. You start having to take 3 minutes to really think about the things that you and spend the whole 3 minutes doing that. And it's like you start to dig a little deeper, and it just puts you again, it changes that mindset a little bit. But yeah, we gotta be careful. We gotta go down a whole nother rabbit hole. I got way more stuff to cover than this one. So the last of these few habits that I do want to talk about is the reading and the journaling, because it feels like that a lot of the reading has maybe inspired some of this. And I know you've taken some books to use as themes for some of your podcast episodes. But the 2 books I want to talk about specifically with you is the E-Myth, because I'm not familiar with that. And you said that that's one that you've given away about a lot. Mm-hmm. What book is that? What is that about?
So E-myth stands for the entrepreneurial myth.
Oh, okay.
And it basically is just it's attacking the idea that entrepreneurs are a special breed of people who are tenacious and never give up and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and that those are the qualities of an entrepreneur. Certainly that can show itself, so not that those things can't be there, but it actually just lays out that really building a business is about systems, and that if you can have good systems, you can have a business. And so the way he teaches the lessons is he tells the story of this woman who runs a bakery, but she runs a bakery because she really loves making pie, not because she wants to sell pies or because she wants to market pies.
Or she wants to be a millionaire or
Yeah,
whatever.
or because she wants to do any of that. She just wants to make pies and make people happy with her pie. But on the surface, it's like, well, that's not going to cut it for an entrepreneur. And he goes through and just walks through the tale of this fictitious story, of how that's not accurate, and how by systemizing things, she can run a business where she is the one who gets to make the pies, and everything else that the business needs can still succeed and operate, and she doesn't have to wear all of the hats. Now, she might have to wear some of them to understand what is needed, right? But she doesn't have to permanently commit to doing marketing, right?
Right.
The business needs to market, but she personally doesn't have to be the person that does that. So
That's brilliant. I love that. Well, I'm
yeah.
gonna have to check. Well, what I was the most excited about after going through your information was like all these books that you had that weren't on my list. So that was really
Okay,
cool. But the other book that I wanted to talk about that again I'm not familiar with, but the concept really appealed to me was Range.
Oh man.
Tell me about that book and how that applies to what you've been doing.
Oh man. So that book, I think it just came out in like February of this year.
Oh, nice.
So it's a relatively new book, but it's written by a guy named David Epstein, and there's kind of a common sentiment in America, at least, and probably throughout the world, that the best way to succeed is to be as hyper focused as possible. So if you knew someone that wanted to be a podcaster and you were like, man, if you could start at 11, you'd be so much farther ahead than me who didn't start till 35. Like, that's what you should absolutely do. And we apply that logic to everything. He uses Tiger Woods as maybe the most quintessential example of this, where it's like, well, he's a golfer, but he started when he was 2, right? So if you ever want to be really great at something, the earlier you start, the better you are. And to be clear, it's not just about starting something when you're a kid. It's also true in the way that we approach education. We want people to pick their career when they're 18. Like when you go to college, hey, what's your major going to be? And even if you change your major, we expect that you pick one by the time you're 22, right? Like you have to have a hyper specialized plan here. And David Epstein actually started as a scientist. He was actually working on his master's degree in some scientific field, and realized that he actually just didn't really like doing experiments. He didn't really like being a scientist in that way. He didn't want to live in the field and measure stuff. So he quit and became a writer. But he applies scientific methodology to his work. So the book is not just an argument of intuition. He uses a ton of data and examples that actually show that hyperspecialization is actually not the best way. And to be clear, he doesn't say that it's not a zero-sum game. Again, it's not binary.
Right.
It's a spectrum.
Right.
I don't mean to go on too far, but just
No,
to try and explain it, he basically explains that there is in the world, on two extremes of the spectrum, what he calls a kind world and what he calls a wicked world. And so a kind world would be a world in which problems that are presented have clear solutions, clear rules, clear outcomes. So a game like golf or a game like chess would be an example of a kind world thing, because it's really obvious what you're supposed to do. It's really obvious when you do something wrong, you get immediate feedback. It's really obvious what you need to correct. The opposite end of that spectrum would be a wicked world. That would be, he uses the example over and over, like Martian tennis, but you don't know what the outcome's supposed to be. You don't know what the rules are. You might not even be sure exactly what's going on. So running a business is a much more of a wicked world thing because you don't necessarily know all of the challenges that you're going to face. You kind of have to take them as they come and figure those out as they go, right? Another example of that would be cancer research. So how this kind of all breaks down is that kind world activities like golf or chess really benefit from hyper specialization because largely what they are is pattern recognition and memorizing and getting good at patterns. Well, the thing is that if something is pattern driven, we can usually make a machine that does that, right? Because it just has to do this one thing over and over and over again. Well, then when you get into something like cancer, where we don't know what the answers are and we don't know what the rules necessarily are, well, IBM applied Watson, which is a computer of theirs, years and years ago to cancer research. It's done nothing. Well, is it because IBM's Watson is crap? Not really. It's because computer programs, machines, aren't good at solving problems that we don't know how to solve, which cancer is an example of, right? So the book is really just an advocation of trying to understand what kind of problems you're dealing with, and then understanding, based on the kind of problem it is, does hyper specialization make more sense, or does broad generalization make more sense? And it turns out that the more complicated problems are, the more breadth matters versus depth. Anyway, it's a whole book, so I could go on and on, but
well, no, it's funny because it ties right back into the other book, The Entrepreneurial Myth. Like, because like as an entrepreneur, I think about the entrepreneurs I know, and most of them didn't start. They've done something else along the way. It's like everything that you do along the way, every skill that you learn, then applies to where you ultimately end up. I interviewed this one lady, Julie Broad, who does book launches. But she, she originally started, her first career was in real estate investment, and then she was doing that, and then saw the opportunity to write a book about real estate investing because she saw a niche that wasn't being served in that market, and then struggled through the book writing process and saw the holes in publishing, but she learned how to write books along the way. And then once that was done, then she realized that all the struggles that she went through with publishing, she realized there was a niche there. So then she got into the publishing, but the writing of the book, then she was able to help other writers through the process of now being a book publisher. And so it's like every iteration of what she did before helped her to become what that next iteration of her life was to be. And I think it's true time and time again. It's certainly been the case for me. Like, I mean, everything, I can't tell you how the ability to swing a hammer has allowed me to have a podcast. You wouldn't think the two correlate, but they do. Everything along the line has helped get me to where I am today, for sure. So
yeah. The final thing I would say is just if anyone is interested in the book but feels like they would maybe want to know more before committing to buying it or something, on YouTube there is an hour-long conversation between David Epstein and Malcolm Gladwell, Malcolm Gladwell is probably my favorite author of all time.
That's a smart cookie too, man. Holy cow.
So you get to watch these two guys sit on a stage for an hour and talk about the book Range. Fascinating conversation. I've watched it 2 or 3 times. I push it clearly as often as I can.
Awesome.
To no benefit of my own other than just I think it's a really brilliant conversation. I had actually already bought the book before I watched that, but then after I watched that, I could not wait to tear through it. Range is an excellent book.
That's great. Have you read 12 Rules for Life?
I have not. Is that the Jordan Peterson book?
Yeah.
I haven't, but I probably really should because I'm actually a huge Jordan Peterson fan. So
if you've consumed enough of his content, you certainly get the gist of it for sure. But going back to that book specifically, yeah, that one is one that just really resonates with me personally, and it certainly seems like it would resonate really strongly with you for sure.
Yeah.
Being that you're in that same realm with me.
Yeah.
Speaking of books and consuming content, first on the book side, do you consume mostly old school? Are you an ebook guy? Are you doing audiobooks? How do you like to consume your books?
I read on ebooks. I read on a Kindle. Yeah.
Kindle.
I used to buy books, but I mean, the Kindle is it's super cool that whenever I want a new book, I can go to Amazon and
click,
and we're sending it to your Kindle. Hey, great. It's also nice because I've moved a few times in the last few years. and packing and carrying books sucks super bad. And
Carolyn knows all about that. Speaking of which,
yeah, or like if you want to go on a trip, like I wanted to go, like when I went to Podfest at the time, I was reading, this is in 2019, but I was reading this trilogy of fantasy novels. Well, I was in like the middle of the first one or something, but I've got to be on a plane for a long time, and because I'm from Springfield, there's layovers everywhere, and I've
you
got a
know
lot
you're
of
going to go through it.
right, there's a lot of downtime. So I want to read the books, but I don't know how far I'm going to get, and I don't want to carry two 500-page novels in my bags when I can carry a Kindle that's like a cell phone. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Oh
great.
yeah, totally.
So yeah, I'm a big e-reader guy and advocate that all day.
Nice, nice. So what about content in general? Is most of the content that you're consuming when you're trying to learn, is that mostly books? Are you doing a lot of like YouTube videos? How are you learning in
Yeah,
this realm?
yeah, I would say it's probably largely books and then podcasts. I watch stuff on YouTube some, but like that Malcolm Gladwell thing I talked about. Like, I've probably watched every bit of Malcolm Gladwell content I can find on YouTube. Um, so there's things like that I'll watch. I mean, that was another reason that I thought I would like podcasting is, and this sounds incredibly nerdy, I feel, but I just really like watching interviews or listening to, like, I just really love a good interview. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, I like learning something from two intelligent people having a conversation.
right,
Like
exactly.
how weird is that?
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, that's Rogan's appeal. Because
Yes.
you talked about Rogan, because he's interviewing famous people, and certainly he has plenty of celebrity on there. But like Peter Attia, who the
Right.
heck is that guy?
Well,
Who,
even Jordan Peterson
or even,
before.
yeah, Jordan Peterson before he had that stage. Like, who is this guy?
Right.
And like, there's certainly, that was always my appeal with Rogan, is the guest that he had on that I didn't know, that I had no clue who. Now he's got some of those, like the conspiracy theorist guys that go a little deep, whatever.
Right.
But I think that that's kind of neat
Yeah.
too, that he has some of these guys that are kind of out there in left field, because it keeps it real, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree entirely. I mean, I would say that Joe Rogan, and then there's another guy, and these are like the two most famous podcasters, probably. So, whatever, I get it. Coattail writer here,
Right.
but yeah, Joe Rogan and Bill Simmons are two guys that I listen to on a regular basis,
I
and they
haven't
both.
listened to Bill Simmons' podcast.
Now Bill Simmons, he's not like Rogan. Bill Simmons is largely sports and pop culture.
Oh,
So,
okay. That's probably why.
right, I'm a huge basketball fan, and Bill Simmons in 2007 wrote this book that's the history of the NBA according to the Sports Guy,
Oh, is it
and
the Bill Simmons from the NBA?
yeah, well, from like
Oh,
ESPN and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay, okay, gotcha.
yeah, same guy. But yeah, I think he does a really good job of talking about sports as this like kind of as a hybrid of like journalist and fan. So I find it to be pretty good. But anyway, yeah. So I listen to podcasts. I read. I watch some video, but I would say listening and reading is probably mostly how I consume things.
What are you most interested in right now? What are you learning right now? What subjects are you fascinated with?
Whew. I mean, I'm so deep down the personal development rabbit hole, man. I feel like I'm going to sound like unintentionally pretentious or something, and I'm not trying to, but like the conversation that I can't stop having lately, and anyone who listens to my show, you joked earlier about yourself being repetitive. Like they've got to be coming for me with pitchforks soon. But it's this idea of balance, but not just like, oh well, if there's left there has to be right, or if there's sweet there has to be sour, or whatever. Yes, those are examples, and those are true too, but really the level of it that I've been most fascinated by is this idea of like holding two ideas that are seemingly opposed simultaneously. So an example of this would be, and this is going to sound way deeper than I mean for it to be, probably, or but it's like with death. right? Like death is a really, really traumatizing thing. However, at least in my own experience and other people I've read that have talked about this, um, whenever you really look at I saw a thing recently where they said when you inquire into the pain of death, what you find is love. And what you realize is that the reason that the death of a loved one hurts so much and is so profound is only because of the depth and profoundness of the love that you had for that person. So you simultaneously find yourself experiencing this tragedy, this really, really significant tragedy, and at the same time also understanding the most beautiful thing that you could, right? Which is the love for this person. And so the way I always say it is like, I used to think that the hard work in life was standing up for what you think is right? Because a lot of people can't or won't or whatever do that. And so I thought, well, if you see an injustice and you stand up for it, that's the hard work. But it's not. Like, that is hard, or can be. But what's really hard is to stand up for that injustice and simultaneously be empathetic towards the person that you are calling out or standing up to, right? So being able to understand that something needs to change, but also understanding that the person who you're taking that up with maybe isn't a monster, right? And being able to hold some empathy for them while simultaneously still not being a doormat yourself. Like, that's the hard work. That's the hard thing. Yeah. Anyway,
That goes back to that shift in mindset thing.
it does, man. I had an author on my podcast a few weeks ago who I shared this with, because again, I can't stop talking about it. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's like that one quote. Contradiction is the lever of transcendence." And I said, "Man, I don't get tattoos, but if I did, that might be the one right there." Like,
Right.
man, like how, because again, it's like understanding that contradiction in death as an example, a really relatable one. Understanding that contradiction, for me, that was the lever that allowed me to transcend past the day-to-day tragedy of it, right? So
Well, I like to use the example of the road rage that I would always struggle with. Like, I used to have a horrible commute across Atlanta, and over the years, you just naturally develop this road rage of frustration with other drivers. And it's something I struggled with for years. And I actually had a couple of experiences I've talked about on podcasts that helped me kind of shift my perspective. But in doing so and getting that shift in perspective, like one of the things I tried to use, Jim Rowan is another guy you should check out. He's got a lot of YouTube videos, and he talks about this specifically and with like the seasons and stuff like that. But anyway, with the road rage, this was like, instead of approaching something with frustration, approach it with fascination. Like when that guy cuts you off in traffic and didn't wave or whatever, it's like, well, why? Why? I mean, like, your first reaction is, oh, that guy's a jerk. Screw him. I'm gonna flip him off, and I can't stand him. What an asshole, whatever. But it's like, well, maybe that guy is on his way to the hospital. Maybe that guy just got into a fight with his wife, and he's on his last straw, and he's going to get a divorce or something like that. Maybe that guy is late for his kid's soccer game. Maybe that guy, there's all these different scenarios that if you would take 5 minutes to be empathetic to why that guy, and maybe the guy's just a jerk. Who knows? I mean, that's certainly possible too. But at the end of the day, it's like, is that guy's misery and that guy's difficult situation worth you getting upset about it? Like, you're just on your way to the grocery store. You don't have anywhere to be. You're not late for something. You're happy go lucky. Your music's turned on. Your windows rolled down. Now you're gonna get all pissed off and worked out because this guy's having a bad day. Like, why do you want to? What's that? How's that helping you? How's that helping your cause? You were happy go lucky 5 seconds ago. Now this guy's gonna completely change your perspective. Or what could you do to maybe change his perspective? How could you? Hold the door open for the next guy? How could you let the next guy in from traffic? How could you be just a little bit more considerate, or maybe change somebody else's perspective in a positive way?
Right.
And so that's kind of that was what it took for me to kind of start to have some of that mind. It's not as morbid as death or anything, but it's something that just a little tip to try to kind of help.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I watched this thing recently on Netflix called The Midnight Gospel, which is actually created by Duncan Trussell, the guy who we shared the quote from earlier about the phoneless fool not knowing he should be mad and scared. Midnight Gospel is incredibly psychedelic, so it probably is not for everyone. It's an animation, and it's very bizarre. However, what it actually is, and
You said it was on Netflix?
Yeah, you should check it out as a podcaster. So what it is it's episodes or conversations. It's not, I don't think it's full episodes, but it's conversations from his podcast that are the dialogue of the show, but then instead of the animation that you're seeing relating to that, the animation doesn't relate to that. So but it does metaphorically. So you're watching like these really thoughtful, interesting conversations, or listening to, while watching these really crazy, weird cartoon stories play out. Oh. But man, it is one of the most
interesting,
one of the most profound things I've seen. It is the most beautiful piece of art that I've probably seen in I don't know 10 years. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. I put music throughout my show, which I think is somewhat rare. I don't see that a lot of podcasts have music baked in throughout the whole show like I do. And I always thought that was me being slightly innovative. And then I see this Midnight Gospel, and it's just like, whew, I didn't know that you could do it like that. Like,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect segue. So I wanted to shift gears, and we're going to get a little bit nerdy, and we'll probably lose a few listeners here, but I want to talk about podcasting specifically and go dive into these details, because the other podcaster that we brought up earlier, Malcolm Gladwell, also does a really cool job with his podcast about bringing in those little clips. And I was not aware. I was aware of Malcolm Gladwell as the author, but I had not dug into his podcast until I found him from you.
Okay.
And hearing you talk about it. So he's doing that thing, and then you're talking about Duncan Trussell doing this thing, and I love the idea of, like, with your little musical breakups too. So did you get that idea from those guys, or was that something you came up with on your own with your little breakups?
No, yeah, it was something I really came up on, I mean, in collaboration with my friend Misha, but asking me what the inspiration for the show is, or what the show is supposed to be. I mean, now it's exploring the walk of life, but it's really still the same thing, which is ultimately just trying to create like a cool, laid back, hangout conversation. And while obviously the listener isn't participating in the conversation actively, the idea is that it's like maybe you walked into a bar or something and sat down next to some guys who were having an interesting conversation that you got to overhear, right? Something like that. I don't know. Anyway, though, if you were at my house hanging out with me, we would listen to music in the background. I wouldn't just sit in silence and talk to someone typically, right?
Right. Like in a bar, you've got music in the background.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
So it was really born out of me wanting to try and recreate that. And so how it ended up working was like the music plays underneath the conversation, not for the whole show, because it gets a little too distracting.
Right.
But I have music play for a minute to 2 minutes underneath the tail end of a segment, and then I break it and then insert usually 30 seconds to a minute's worth of music, which is usually all instrumental. But yeah, because it's like, I love music so much. I am not a musician at all, but I love music. And so,
well, I think it adds a lot of flavor and character to a show to have that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got it in my intros and my outros, and what I'll do is I'll pull a highlighted clip, and then I'll promote that on social media. And a lot of times I'll put music to that particular highlighted clip. But now what I want to do is take that a step further and take the highlighted clip with the music now and reinsert it back into the episode. But to give the show just a little bit more character throughout the course of it. The interviews that you do, are they all in one sitting and you're breaking them up into segments, or are you having multiple interviews over time and that's the reason for the breakups with the music?
No, it's all one straight recording, and
it's
then
you just break it up whenever you find a good editing spot.
Yeah, I just look and try and edit. I mean, part of it is the flow of the conversation, but I mean, it's also just based on the time. I try and have at minimum 3 different times that music plays, one of those being at the end of the show. Right. But depending on the length, it might be 4, 5, 6 times. So I try and kind of evenly space it out too. But it certainly does. I try and make it break at a natural point in the conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's what was really cool. But that's what prompted the question, because they are such natural breaks, and you kind of pick up in a nice fluid
Right.
manner. So are you having breaks in the conversation for like, hey, we'll take a bathroom break or whatever, like kind of thing, or you're purely finding those in post production?
Yeah, yeah, just purely. Yeah, we sit and record straight through. I mean, if someone wanted to take a break, they could. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not a
Well,
part of
I've
that.
actually had to take bathroom breaks before, like when I was first starting, and because we're long format, you get over an hour and a half, and it's not uncommon for people to need to take a
Right.
relief. Well, and a lot of mine, up until COVID, I was all in person. All my
Mm,
stuff was, we would actually literally take a bathroom break, get up and, take a break
right.
and hang out and come back. But with those natural breaks that you have with the music, it lends itself perfectly for an opportunity to advertise. Have you thought about just advertising for people, like either for free or just doing it, kind of like with,
Yeah, kind of.
or
I
reached out to anybody about that, or?
Yeah, I haven't really reached out to any companies because I'm my understanding is yours, where it's like I don't really have the listener base to justify being paid for that.
Yeah, but
Um,
my thought was like, okay, just start off doing it for free. And the reason, what gave me the idea is, again, I'm headed out to Colorado, and my brother invested in this small little, just some of his buddies started this spice rub
mhm.
kind of thing, and they're just a small business. They're just scraping by, just trying to make ends meet, and just trying to grow a little bit. They're just a small business. I'm like, well, shoot, maybe I'll give them a little plug, do a little sponsored thing, and like, no, I'm not going to charge them anything. They're just trying to make it. They're just trying to get their feet wet, and then if I can promote them, and what made me think of it was like with you with the food bank, and how you
Yeah.
specifically make a point that you're not affiliated with them, and I'm like, well, shoot, just just promote them. You don't even have to take the time to say like, okay, I'm not officially
Yeah.
affiliated. I'm just.
So here's where that's born out of. So when I first started, so I did think about, well, I think I might just do some commercials for stuff that I like, and I'm a huge fan of a bagel called Thomas Bagels. It's just a
Oh yeah,
brand.
sure.
Uh, but yeah, so I did a fake commercial that I just came up with on the spot one day for Thomas Bagels, but it's ridiculous, right? Like it's not a real, like it's not a commercial they would allow to be
Right,
aired.
right.
I
Almost satire.
Yes, it is. But so then I went to Podfest, and I asked at Podfest in 2019, they had some attorneys there, and I asked one of the attorneys, like, "Hey, I'm kind of like, it's kind of like a Saturday Night Live deal where I'm just doing a kind of a satiric or a parody commercial for this company, but is there any? I mean, I know there's no problem with it now because my show's not popular enough for anyone to hear it, but
Nobody
uh,
ever know about it.
yeah, exactly. But should I keep going down that road? Like, should I keep doing that?" And he was like, I mean, I don't know. He's like, I'm not listening to your show, so I haven't heard that, so I don't know. But if you look at Saturday Night Live, they don't use the real product names, right?
Right.
Like they don't do, I don't even know the name of a diarrhea medication, but they do colon blow, right? Like they make a parody of the name. So even they're not actually doing real product names. So take that maybe for what you will. And I was just like, okay. So I stopped doing that, not even because I thought I was at risk of being sued anytime soon, but just like, well, there's not really a benefit to me really putting myself into trying to create these parody commercials that maybe I can't even really have if the show ever makes it, you know?
Right.
And then so because of that, that's why with Ozarks Food Harvest, I don't know what kind of, I mean, I don't know why they would ever have a problem with me promoting them, but I I just state, hey, there's no official relationship, just so there's no question that I don't officially represent them.
Have you ever
But
thought about having that conversation with them?
um, I have, but it goes back to the same thing where it's like I feel like I'm trying to sound self-important, like, hey, I've got a podcast, so
Well,
maybe
especially, I
you'd
mean, if
like,
you're offering to do it for free, because I think what
yeah,
the conversation I had with Pablo Gonzalez was really enlightening for me, because he said, like, at the end of the day, what we are and what we do is we're a platform.
mm-hmm,
We're a we're no, he said, I'm sorry, we're a stage.
mm,
We're a stage for people. We're king makers. We're not kings. We're king makers. We provide a platform for people to share their message, and so like, and particularly like with a charity. So like, I work with the charity Hope Through Soap. It's a buddy of mine I just happened to go to high school with that has been able to do some great things. And I'm not affiliated. I mean, I volunteer there. I go try to spend time with them whenever I can. I donate stuff. I've been able to create some relationships and do some networking for them. But like, I have no official capacity for them or anything like that. But for all intents and purposes, I don't do any kind of a commercial or advertising currently for anything. But I was sitting there thinking like, well, I probably should, at least maybe that's a way to get the ball rolling, or at least just to get used to doing ads for that matter, even
Sure.
just reading press and getting good at it or whatever. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And yours is so your show is so set up for it with those musical intro outros. It's like, man, it's like I feel like you got to take advantage of that somehow, you know?
Yeah, well, if someone wants to pay me, then I will. I'm probably, or if I had a cause like Ozark's Food Harvest, I do just because I just think it is really important to help feed hungry people. Like that
Yeah.
sucks to be hungry, especially in America of all places. Not because we're better than people, but because we have it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. So, but anyway, beyond that, though, I mean, the thing is that the walk show is a very personal thing for me where um on the one hand, I am totally willing to be a sellout if someone will pay me to be a sellout. However, I'm not really very interested in promoting something that I don't really care about just for the sake of it. Like I would rather hear music than an ad that I don't
Yeah.
care about.
No, I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking about only promoting things that you are super highly, but like
Yes,
Ozark Food Bank,
right.
like I mean, like
That's
literally creating something for them. Or like going back to the beginning of this question, it's like how to monetize. How do we ultimately
hmm
figure out how to make a living doing this full time?
Yeah.
And you know, and again, like that 10,000 mark for me, it's gonna take a while to get there.
Oh yeah,
Like
I'm
I'm
really
just
far from that. Yeah.
that's not gonna happen overnight. So it's like, but I feel like there's other ways, you know, there's got to be some other ways. And I've just been constantly kind of racking my brain thinking about all these different things. So it's like, I'm fortunate that I have friends that have started small business. I have friends that have started a brewery. I've got some friends that, like I said, they're doing that spice company thing and doing some charity. So it's like, well, since I can't get people to pay me to advertise, but I want to, but like, and again, as soon as you're advertising, then you kind of have an appearance of a little bit more legitimacy or whatever. It's like, well, why not create those relationships, even if like there's not, again, because if it's a win-win, it's not costing me anything to promote their thing. It's a because what I ultimately want to do, like even when I do have the 10,000 downloads, what I want to do is only go after products and people and companies that I already currently endorse, that already that I'm a big fan of. Like Body Glide, for example, is one that it just happens to be a product that I love, and the company does great things, and they've been huge during COVID-19, helping people with rashes, wearing these masks, and they're just good people. They're a great company.
Yep.
Ultra Shoes is another one. So, like some of those, I've been able to have their CEOs on. I've been able to have them to promote the show, but then also too, like I want to, if I have an opportunity to do an ad or a commercial for somebody, then I want to do it for those people that I love, regardless. And so, ultimately, if I when I do get paid, that's great. But in the meantime, I still feel really good that I'm creating a win-win situation.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. That's absolutely fair. I guess I would just say that I currently I don't know what company would grab me that way. I mean, that's why I talk about Ozark's Food Harvest like I do, because it just resonated with me as something that matters. Um, so yeah, I don't know. We'll just have to see, I guess, what what comes my way.
Yeah. Right, right. If everything went according to plan, what does the next 10 years look like?
Um, I mean,
What's that ideal everyday look like 10 years from now?
right. Yeah, I mean, I would say, if I could win the lottery of life, it would be that I don't work a software company anymore, which I should be clear at this point in time, I am incredibly grateful for the opportunity to work there.
For
And the roof
sure,
that it
right?
provides over my head and the electricity that powers this computer and this microphone. So I don't
Count
mean to
our
sound
blessings.
ungrateful. And I really do mean that, like, especially now when so many people have lost their job, it's amazing that I haven't been affected in that way. So I don't mean to sound flippant about it. However, if I could, if I could have my way, yeah, I would do podcasting full time. I would be scheduling interviews, doing interviews. I would still probably do some of the editing myself because I really enjoyed some of that process. And yeah, just talking to people and yeah, promoting stuff as much as I can through the show. I love talking to the different individuals. It's crazy to me how many interesting people there are out there.
That's been really cool, right? To see, like, because I kind of had this base level of, we'll call them celebrities, but not really celebrities, but just really interesting people that I would like to talk to, like the Jordan Petersons of the world, for example. But then, like, now as I've started digging into this space and looking for interesting guests, it's amazing how many really cool people are out there doing some really, really cool things.
Yeah, well, it's the celebrity thing where it's, there are a lot. I mean, it's the premise of your show, right? It's there are
Yeah, right.
regular people that do really cool stuff and that are worth hearing. Which I don't mean to say that about myself, but it's very humbling and generous that you would have me on the show, right? Like, um, uh, it's really cool how many people are out there doing meaningful stuff. And I talked to a guy a few weeks ago who lives in Mumbai, India. That's where he's from originally, and he's a marathon runner, and he's also runs a financial company. But he didn't start running marathons until he was like 48. He's
Oh,
like 50.
wow.
Like, that's crazy. You know what I mean? And he was a really, really generous, nice, insightful guy who had really good stuff to say. And this, I mean, man, talk about circling way back. But, earlier when I mentioned people, if you're watching the news all the time or just consuming politics stuff all the time, that can lead you down one path. Well, that's what I like, why I like doing the show I do and like the show that you're doing, is because there's also all this other stuff that you could spend your time consuming instead that has a positive impact on your life. And maybe not every single episode of every single podcast blows your socks off, but there's still interesting stuff there that's certainly more interesting than what senator from what state that you've never been to said today. Who cares?
And
You
it's
know?
you're almost always going to get some little nugget, some
Yeah.
little something positive that you can take away from it. And
Always.
and you're almost for sure not going to get something negative like you do when you're listening to said politician.
Yeah, well, like when I first started my podcast, I talked about my first episode earlier, but I think my second episode, because I started at the end of January, so it was right when the Super Bowl happened, right? I complained about people's reaction to the Super Bowl. Like, I was like calling people out for how they consume football or something. And then I had another one. It's funny, you were talking about road rage earlier. I had another episode called Tap the Brakes, where I actually spent an afternoon one day watching road rage videos on YouTube, which I didn't even know was a thing, but it is. And it was just crazy to me how, I mean, not just saying like getting frustrated road rage, but like people pull over and fist fight people over road rage. And it's like, how? Like, didn't you have somewhere to go? Like, what? How are you this unbusy that you can pull over and fight all of a sudden? And it doesn't have to be that way. Anyway, all of this is to say that I realized, though, that what I was doing was I was talking about things that I thought should be different, but I didn't really like. And then I was like, there's already a ton of that out there. And not that it's all garbage or something. It's not. But I don't really want to make that. I want to talk about stuff that I think is cool and that I think is interesting and I think is fun, because that's more fun, and so I just kind of stopped. I mean, not that I never complain. Certainly I'm not above it, but
Sure. We all have
yeah,
our moments, right?
yeah,
But at the end of the day, it's like, are you uplifting and are you
right,
well? And I kind of, this is going to be a good way for us to kind of wind this thing down. At the end of the day, it's like, are you building? Are you constructing? Or are
right,
you tearing down? Are you
right.
deconstructing? Are you being positive or are you being negative? And some, again, now coming full circle to mindset, it's like how you walk into these situations, how you perceive what's going on around you. And that mindset allows you to control that reaction, allows you to control that or to put some thought behind that behavior after the fact. And
Yeah.
um, it allows for much more meaningful conversation, certainly a lot more normal society at large for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so I guess we'll just wrap things up by telling everybody where they can find you on social media, where they can find the show. And we already talked briefly, but let's make sure that we talk about your charity that's near and dear to your heart and where people can find it.
Sure. So my two shows are the Walk Show podcast, just the Walk Show. It is a podcast. You can find that at thewalkshowpodcast.com. But you can also find the Walk Show podcast on Facebook, the Walk Show pod. I think it's just the Walk Show on Instagram and the Walk Show pod on Twitter. And as far as where you can listen to the show, again, you can listen to it directly through my site, but you can find it on Apple, Spotify, Google, all of the platforms have it. And then my other show is that we haven't really talked about as much, but it's Pick Up Your Sticks, and that's the one that I co-host with my friend Brett Lindley. Pick Up Your Sticks is all about video games, but instead of, I mean, we do talk about news and reviews and current events and gaming quite a bit, but we also try and explore. I mean, the tagline for that show is "Why Gaming Matters." So we try and explore also the emotional connection that we have with games. I think that video games are something that are easy for people to dismiss as like toys. And that's fair in some ways, but in a lot of other ways, it's not. I mean, just like a good book can bring you to tears, just like a good movie can cause an emotional response, just like a good song, a video game can do that too. And frankly, video games, kind of similar to the way that film combines audio and imagery and all of that at once, video games do that too, except they add another layer, which is that you get to actually participate in what's happening as opposed to just being a passive consumer. So anyway, so we really, again, try, it's long form conversations just like this show, just like the Walk Show, but it's all about gaming. You can find that PUYS pod on Twitter. And then the show is on all the platforms as well. Again, Pick Up Your Sticks.
Well, talking about those video games, and one of the things that Jordan Peterson talks about games in general, and I think it applies to video games when you're actually playing the video games, you know, they really are a metaphor for life and for how to interact in real life. You know, you think about when you're playing video games, you can kind of be initially a situation where the guy that has all the bells and whistles comes in and wipes everybody out, and it can be a very one-sided game. And at the beginning, it can seem not very healthy, not very normal, whatever. But if you keep playing the game, if you play it for the duration, then it becomes a game of games. And you have to, and the guy that comes in and wipes everybody out and takes his ball and goes home isn't the guy that you want to keep playing with. And what I find so fascinating with video games, and it applies in some sports as well, is like as you continue to keep playing, the game evolves. The game becomes more about teamwork. It becomes more dynamic. It begins to manifest itself the way real life does, and that you have to learn certain levels of cooperation and interaction, and it becomes multi-level, it becomes multifaceted. And when you're playing video games, you get that. What I tend to have a problem with my kids in particular is when they're watching video games, because when you're just watching the video game, then it's like you said, you take your interaction out of it. Then you're just along for the ride, and that certainly changes the dynamic, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally am not someone who watches game streamers that often. There's a couple that I can watch, but really, they're like commenting on gameplay more so than just playing. So I'm with you in that it doesn't really appeal to me that much, but it's not really that different than just watching a pointless TV show. I mean, with the level of popularity that reality TV gets in this country, like the amount of Real Housewives of whatever city exist, I cannot hear complaints about video game TV because whatever.
I could not agree more.
We're already lost. So there might not be value in watching PewDiePie play Minecraft, but it can't be any worse than watching the women of Real Housewives of Atlanta get their nails done. So whatever.
Ain't that the truth, brother? Ain't that the truth, man? Well, like you said, at the end of the day, it's like there's a lot of positive stuff out there you can find to consume, and there's certainly a lot of garbage. And it's like what you're consuming on a day-to-day basis, it adds up, and an accumulation year after year, time after time, over the years, all that stuff adds up. On that note, that's a great segue into how I wanted to wrap this up with your podcast and your journey that you're going down. It's really interesting that you brought up at the beginning when you were first doing some of these podcasts about the kind of negative attributes and the calling people out, the Super Bowl and all that. And to listen to your journey and to listen to episodes into the people that you're bringing on and the things that you're talking about, these best practices, these principles, and to listen to you begin to implement them into your lives, and to really like it's I feel like I'm experiencing you grow and you evolve and have this full circle experience, and it's really rewarding for me as the listener. And I think it's a testament to what you're doing and to this journey that you're on, and I'm really glad that you're on this journey, and I'm glad that you're sharing it, and you're stepping outside your comfort zone, you're doing all these different things, and it's incredibly inspiring. And it's like I came up with the tag like ordinary people living extraordinary lives, and you live in middle America. You're a super tall guy, but the average white boy, if you will, but you are figuring out how to live this extraordinary experience, and you're going through this journey of determining what an extraordinary life looks like. And for me, that's just so fulfilling, and it's so exciting, and I'm really glad I found your podcast because it's fun to watch the journey, man.
Yeah, man. Well, like I said, I am truly humbled to hear you say that, and like I said earlier, and I don't say it's a flatter. I'm not a flatterer, but it really does mean a lot that you asked me to come on the show, and it means a lot to hear you say those things. It's just like when Jameson sends me the email, right? Like it's very encouraging to hear someone believe in what you're doing and get behind you in it. So I appreciate it very much.
Well, the cool thing about it is like this can be a lonely art sometimes. And for me, like, you feel like a lot of times, like, is really anybody listening? And like, what am I doing? And there's certainly these moments of crisis, these depression, these moments of depression where you're just, it's a real struggle. But then what we don't realize is like just the act of doing, man, we plant these little seeds and we don't know when they're going to come to fruit. We don't know when they're going to start to grow, but planting these seeds along the way, man, it's like Tupac has a great saying. It's like, I'm not going to be the guy that changes the world, but I might be inspiring the guy that is going to change the world. And if I can say I had something to do with that, then that's all right, man.
That's crazy that you would quote Tupac to me, man. I mean, he's not, famous. I mean, he's famous still, but obviously he's been gone for a long time. So this shows you how single I am. I still have posters in my home. But I definitely have a Tupac poster up in the house. So awesome. There you go.
That's a good note to end on, man. Well, hey, man, keep doing what you're doing and know that you're planting those seeds, man, and you're inspiring a lot of us along the way. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, dude. Thank you so much, Nate, for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
We'll do it again soon.
Cool.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening. So, what'd you think? What did I miss? Was there a topic you wish we had covered? Was there an area of discussion you want to know more about? Or was the whole thing just too long? Please send us your questions and feedback on social media to @extraordinarypodcast or check out our website, extraordinarypodcast.net. Subscribe there for all the latest episodes, blog posts, and more. And if you're tired of living the same old ordinary life, shoot me an email, nate@extraordinarypodcast.net, and I will send you your own customizable blueprint that will walk you through step by step how to create your own extraordinary life. And if you or someone you know already fits the profile, You can submit a request to be interviewed on the website as well. Finally, if you like what you heard or learned today, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and follow the Extraordinary Podcast on all your favorite platforms like YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you feel inspired, show your support for the show by donating through Patreon. It is through this financial support that we are able to continue to bring to light ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Thank you for your support, and most of all, just being you. This is Nate G, and we'll see you next week.